No one likes to talk about outages. They're horrible to experience as an employee, and they take a heavy toll on customer confidence and future revenue, but they do happen. And even publicly traded tech powerhouses such as eBay and Microsoft fall prey to outages. Aberdeen Group estimated that the average cost of downtime for businesses is $161,000 per hour. When AWS experienced multiple outages in December of last year, the immense impact and the domino effect that followed caused many enterprises to seriously reevaluate their disaster recovery plans. Why? Well, when you think about it, especially in the case of hyperscalers like AWS, we are highly dependent on the cloud. And the appeal of its possibility, the ease, scale, and essentially limitless opportunity lulls us into an often false sense of security, when in fact, it often widens the gap and increases risk. With on-prem, there was always the possibility of an outage, but with cloud, many often underestimate its scale and how it's woven into every aspect of our daily lives as a business, as an employee, and even as a consumer. And while the cloud does have many advantages, service failures don't just disappear when you move to the cloud. Instead, enterprises need to increase control and reduce risk to efficiently react, manage, and reduce the impact that outages have on the business and its customers. And that's in addition to managing the ever-evolving threat landscape and the possibility of a cyber breach or a cybersecurity attack. So the most common causes of an outage include human error, because hey, everyone makes mistakes, gaps in knowledge, hacking or security breaches, equipment failures, poor or missing processes, or even network issues, or simply just software and IT configurations. The thing is, as massive as some of these tech powerhouses are, you can't always rely on your service provider to inform you of an outage. Organizations really have to depend on monitoring services with complete observability across their entire stack, from on-prem, hybrid, and cloud environments, so they can take immediate action before or at the time of an outage. And the thing is, you can't protect or even prevent what you can't see or what could or is about to happen, whether it's capacity, disruptions, or failures. But if you have a holistic, all-inclusive monitoring solution that really unites all ops teams versus operating in silos, your business can rapidly go from surviving to thriving when it comes to readiness and remediation.
So let's talk about the consequences of outages. As is the common theme here, it's not as much a question of whether an outage will occur in your company, but when. We all know that outages cost companies money, and a lot of it. The Uptime Institute Global Survey of IT and data center managers found that 4 in 10 outages cost between $100,000 and $1 million. And about 1 in 6 costs over that $1 million mark. And that's just thinking about the immediate revenue loss. But what about the more intangible variables, like employee burnout, product velocity, and brand reputation? Let's dive a little bit deeper into these examples. Let's talk about the loss of revenue, such as the estimated nearly $100 million Facebook lost during their outage in October of 2021. Or what about lost productivity? In a report by ERS IT Solutions called The Cost of IT Downtime, it was found that on average, a business will lose 545 hours of employee productivity because of IT downtime. What about impact to the reputation? Such as a prominent bank recently experiencing a 2-day outage that caused its stock price to drop 2.3%. And then all around outright failure of the business. Like when Codespaces suffered a crippling DDoS attack from a hacker who was attempting extortion and gained access to their Amazon EC2 control panel and deleted unrecoverable customer data, ultimately causing Codespaces to shut their doors. The secret to surviving them is to get better at handling them and learning from the mistakes of others. Nobody is perfect all the time, but we hope by talking about these mistakes, we can all begin the hard work required to avoid them in the future.
So let's start off with our top 10 mistakes you can avoid, kicking it off with number 1, not having a tried and true outage response plan. Okay, so does this sound familiar to anyone? An outage occurs. A barrage of emails is fired to the tech ops team from customer support. Executives begin demanding updates every 5 minutes. Tech team members all run to their separate monitoring tools to see what data they can dig up, often only seeing a teeny tiny part of the problem. Mass confusion ensues as groups start pointing fingers at each other, and sysadmins are often unsure whether to respond to the text from their boss demanding an update or to continue to troubleshoot and apply a possible fix. And then marketing's chiming in, saying they're getting trashed on social media and that they need to send out a mass email or do a blog post to tell people what's happening. And then legal chimes in, a little hesitant and wanting to make sure that they actually don't admit any liability. And all these teams are jumping in to help craft a public-facing response, which may seem like a lovely team building exercise, but in reality, there are other ways to avoid this. So you really need a well-formed process for handling outages, and it must define who is accountable for resolving the issues, who is in the escalation path, and who is responsible for communicating about issues. It also includes post-mortem process for analyzing the root cause behind the outage and addressing any gaps, which can range from building redundancy into systems to changing monitoring settings so that issues can be caught and resolved before an outage might recur in the future.
Next, let's talk about lack of communication about the outage to impacted customers. In the heat of trying to get your company back online, it's easy to go dark. Unfortunately, not communicating with customers often causes a lot of negative consequences, including a flood of support calls, longer hold times, and an all-around poor customer experience. It can produce a perception that your company is unresponsive, untrustworthy, or just not in control. The fault often lies in a poor or missing line of communication between customer-facing groups and your tech ops teams. Not having proper systems like forums, mass emails, etc., with which to notify customers of issues can be a big, big problem. Or companies don't communicate about the outage based on the belief that customers might not even notice the issue, and they will. AKA, lack of communication only makes it worse. So let's talk about how to avoid this. Ensuring you have a defined communication process in place with clearly assigned responsibilities for both internal and external communication during and after the outage is critical. Make sure everyone involved is familiar with the go-to plan, and make sure to not just have it on your company website, because that may also be down during the outage.
Good tips, Sabina. The third one is playing the blame game. So blaming a partner or a vendor is a tactic companies sometimes employ in responding to outages, and it's usually out of panic. It rarely proves successful because customers see it as abdicating responsibility for a decision the company ultimately made. So who chose to depend on that vendor or partner? You did. So by not accepting responsibility, the company is also not taking steps to prevent recurrence of the problem, which is unlikely to be a cloud freezer. So how to avoid? Taking broader responsibility, instituting a review of vendors involved, setting up redundancy or reviewing processes that might have contributed to the issue are all better options than playing the blame game. Ensure that postmortems are blameless and that they get to the root cause of the failing process by using the 5 whys method.
Great. Next is one of my favorites, not knowing an outage is happening in the first place. The worst way to hear about an outage is to have your customers tell you, or possibly having your boss tell you. Having your monitoring infrastructure in the data center is an excellent way to have outages and not get alerted on them, because monitoring is offline too. Even if your data center is in Amazon, you may suffer the embarrassment of not knowing your service is down, which is what happened to Loggly during an extended outage a few years back. The best way to avoid? Getting an alert from a unified SaaS-based monitoring platform like Logic Monitor that tells you if your whole data center is down. Your monitoring platform should provide a complete view of websites, apps, databases, networks, servers, the cloud, etc., so that you can proactively fix issues before customer experience is impacted.
Fair point, Sabina, because I don't think anybody really likes surprises, especially not this kind.
Exactly.
Okay, number 5, inappropriate communication about the outage. So I'll give you an example. When DreamHost customers experienced an issue with their billing system, they responded with what they thought was a humorous explanation, prompting a legendary furor on the part of the customers who focused on Homer Simpson cartoons and jokes rather than genuine apologies and responsible explanations. They savagely attacked DreamHost in online comments and in social media. So how do you avoid this? Because there is a time and place to insert humor into the workplace, but when it impacts the customers, that's probably an area where you want to avoid that. This affects your customer and their ability to do business, so you want to take it seriously. Someone at your customer's company selected you as a vendor, and their judgment could be called into question because of your outage.
And going off that, let's talk about an appropriate way to handle this type of outage. Missing any of the 5 elements to a successful outage apology is pivotal. Not addressing these 5 elements that are core to any well-formed apology is detrimental. How do we avoid it? Well, we include the 5 elements. Why an outage is happening, what is being done to solve it, the ETA for resolution, the plan to prevent it from happening ever again, and what is intended to do to compensate for these troubles. Once again, having a direct and open line of communication between your customer support and tech ops teams is pivotal. The 5 elements are core to any well-formed apology. They will cost you far less in the long run than the loss of revenue you'll experience if your customers leave in large numbers because you mishandled that outage.
So how do you avoid this? Run capacity tests on your systems so you know your headroom and the pattern of how your performance scales with your workload. Another approach is to have the disaster recovery site not active at all, but really be an idle replica of a production site. Of course, this almost certainly means that it'll be slightly misconfigured in a disaster recovery event, unless you take to heart the next mistake.
And number 8, expecting perfection without practice. In 2009, when Chelsea Sullenberger, also known as Sully, landed the US Airjet in the Hudson River with all 155 people aboard surviving, he'd logged more than 20,000 hours of flight time and completed countless simulated emergency exercise. He put in the time in advance so that he knew exactly what needed to be done at each critical moment. Many companies fail to do this, and they do not test their plans or test them often enough to develop an expertise at making them work. And when trouble starts, they're simply not ready. How to avoid? Form a business continuity plan and test it multiple times. Business continuity plan is defined by the process involved in creating a system of prevention and recovery from potential threats to a company. And the life cycle includes business impact analysis, recovery strategies, plan development, and testing and exercising it. It's far better for something to go wrong during a test than during an actual outage.
And number 9, diffusion of responsibility. Researchers have shown in studies that people are less likely to take action or feel a sense of responsibility to handle emergencies when in the presence of a large group of people. Diffusion of responsibility is often used to explain why individuals in distress are less likely to receive assistance if a large group is present. So in essence, individuals in that group collectively decide that if others aren't acting, it must not be that serious. And this happens far less frequently when individuals are confronted by the same situation on their own. So companies often have issues with diffusion of responsibility during outages. Issues are not clearly assigned to individuals to resolve, and groups point fingers at each other or fail to be able to even identify who is actually responsible. And this can often be the result of too many monitoring solutions and unclear escalation paths. So how do you avoid this? You want to make sure to assign clear responsibility in your outage response plan and include timelines for escalation, and try to get all teams using a single monitoring platform, which can automatically notify the correct person based on their role and the type of issue being reported, and which can have escalation chains set up so that after predefined periods of time, escalation is automatic if the issue is not resolved, and notifications go out to the next person in the chain.
Last, but certainly not least, number 10 is suffering from the tyranny of the urgent. When we were researching this content, Logic Monitor reached out to a number of CEOs of rapidly growing SaaS companies. We were surprised when one told us, "I'm interested in the topic, but I wouldn't be able to make the time to attend the live webinar." He went on to explain that that's due to the fact that they're not having any outages right now. As you can see, it's easy to get caught up in the tyranny of urgent priorities and spend all of your time firefighting. In short, ignoring the little things that you can do in advance to prevent outages is equivalent to not spending a few extra minutes putting fresh batteries in your smoke detectors and having some fire extinguishers on hand. Being prepared and proactive is not as glorious, but it is definitely much smarter. How to avoid. Making preventing outages a priority by requiring teams to spend a portion of their time taking proactive steps to prevent them from occurring. Your shareholders and customers will thank you for it. Improving management of outage incidents can produce better outcomes for your company's employees, customers, and shareholders. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And it all starts with avoiding some basic mistakes that others have made before you. We'd like to leave you with some last words from Otto von Bismarck. Fools say that they learn by experience. I prefer to profit by others' experience.
Okay, I love that for Otto, but also love that journey for all of you. We can definitely take it as solid advice in our IT journeys. So let's sum up. Outages can really happen to anyone. And what you want to ensure is that you have a tried and true response and communication plan. Second is that practice makes perfect. Nothing like a solid disaster recovery or remediation plan to ensure business continuity. And then last, vintage is cool, but let's maybe reserve that adjective specifically for fashion or furniture only. The same monitoring solution you were using 10, 5, or even 2 years ago isn't enough. And while I've tried to keep this presentation as buzzword free as possible, I will emphasize the importance of setting up your organization on the path to observability to ensure success and to prevent outages from happening in the future. But you can leverage both past mistakes and proactive future proofing to ensure failures don't happen, or when they do, that your entire ops team can work in unison to fix the problem with minimal to no impact to the business and your customers.